Do not listen to this recording whilst driving or operating machinery. Only listen when you can safely relax and bring your full awareness to your own complete comfort or confusion. This text will be theoretical and sometimes chaotic or poetic in flow. Some connections may be spindly or tenuous. This has been a disclaimer. Hello, this is Sam Machell. I'd like to invite you today for the next 40 minutes to become reacquainted with your body, to become reacquainted with time, to become reacquainted with meaning. What are you doing right now? Are you standing or sitting? You are sweaty. Are your eyes open or closed? What color is the surface beneath you? Take some time to notice the way it feels in contact with your body, the impression it leaves. Feel the sweat. Notice the sweat. Notice the damp and shameful border between your skin and your clothing. How does the controller feel in your hands? Slick, tacky, like an extension of your hands, like one more addition to the post-human body's evolving external networked toolkit of parts and mineral. Flex your fingers. Within your mind, become aware of a tension filling and then leaving each finger in sequence. Where are you? Perhaps you are hiking, building a bridge to cross a stream. Perhaps you are reconnecting a continent. Notice the effervescent flow of monster energy as it passes through your urethra. Feel the warmth of the stew, the warmth as it is conducted through the metal bowl to your calloused cowboy hands. Notice the squelch as you wander the swampy grounds of camp, nodding in greeting to the other members of your gang. Pay close attention to every footstep as you navigate the towering house, dust in your lungs, the memories of deceased family members manifesting about you as you walk. I have prepared this recording to discuss different facets of boredom, how we experience it, and how we can use it in our art as a tool to encourage certain thought or emotion. Are you bored of my voice already? Maybe you will be soon. Think. What does the word boredom mean to you? It is probably grey in colour, dull or ashen, waxy, sterile, in the typeface of a form unsigned, a bill, a novel you hated at school. It probably has personal connotations, memories of pain. You think of boredom as an emotional state, as a restlessness of the mind when the external world is lacking in stimulation. Boredom could come from repetition, from tediousness, from slowness, from being disinterested in what you are doing, in what you are being shown, in what you are being. Within boredom there is a duality, between the internal mind and the external world. In her survey of the historic contexts of boredom, Elizabeth Goodstein writes on this dichotomy: "It is a discursively articulated phenomenon. Boredom is at once objective and subjective, emotion and intellectualization, not just a response to the modern world, but also a historically constituted strategy for coping with its discontents. Notice your thoughts. Most likely they associate boredom with the 9 to 5, with the workday, with an experience that must be endured for the sake of survival, some necessity, some trial, a form of labor or a daily grind, an expectation, an experience of endurance across a period of time is a task to be fulfilled. It is a sweet and fitting thing to be bored for your homeland. We need look no further for examples of this prolonged pain than the legacy of endurance art, an offshoot of the school of performance art with a specific focus on hardship suffered by the artist, be it isolation, exhaustion, hunger, or pain. Look around you. You see remnants of felt torn to shreds by a wild animal. They gather in the corner of the space. You see used condoms and dirty laundry, unmade sheets, empty takeaway boxes. You see a horrifying seedbed of gunky excrement. In 1974, Joseph Beuys spent 3 days of 8 hours each in a gallery space with a wild coyote, his intention being to engage with a symbol of America, endure the feral and the hostile, and against all odds attempt to make a connection. Marina Abramovich's 2002 piece, The House with the Ocean View, saw her living for 12 days within a gallery on water alone. In an open doll's house construction, she would use the toilet, shower, sleep, and drink water in naked view of the public. The ladders leading down from her stage, although sturdy, were runged with knives, offering her no escape. Across the 12 days, visitors would arrive in the space and take a seat, intending only to spend minutes but lose track of time and spend hours. Speaking of the piece, she says, "There's something like, I almost think that if you are in the present and you are purified, that you can create a kind of energy field, that you can change on atomic level the space in a certain way with the public and feel and just be in the present time. I wonder what this purified notion can mean. Perhaps our virtual surrogate bodies are purified in such a way, devoid of any real chemical interference, red meat or alcohol, THC or saturated fats, pumped through of binary only, the purified figment propelled into a time frame of its own, central to the world and the mechanics that operate beneath. In Spencer Yan's forthcoming survival horror, My Work Is Not Yet Done, actions that would in other games be performed by the press of a button are granulated into mundane component parts. The lighting of a fire requires individual constructions to be laboriously placed and then lit. Mechanics are obscured and intermingle in complex ways, resulting in an opaque and potentially frustrating gameplay experience that forces the player to engage with their virtual body, forces the player to deal with the reality of survival in ways that are often ignored. What is survival in a video game if not some kind of abstracted process of endurance art, a performing of virtual bodily functions? I recommend looking into Te-Ching Hsie's one-year performances for this idea taken to a logical extreme. You may also contemplate the way Rockstar's tragic neo-Western epic Red Dead Redemption 2 asks you to maintain Arthur Morgan's body by slowly setting up camp, slowly remembering to shave, slowly cooking, slowly eating, slowly cleaning your gun, slowly brushing your horse, slowly finding comfort in routine. There is a quiet beauty in these slow actions and in the slow feeling of connection you build with Arthur. You share a body, you share ailments, you share a connection to the world, and the world is beautiful and cruel. For German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, boredom was perhaps one of the most serious and deadly concerns in his writings. He sums it up dramatically, writing that boredom is nothing less than direct proof that existence is in itself valueless, that it is nothing other than the sensation of the emptiness of existence. For if the experience of existence was fulfilling, we would not need to strive to find our own meaning. A game like Proteus may disagree, offering little but the slow ticking progression of seasons and the player's own curiosity to keep them occupied on a randomly generated musical island. But certainly this is outside of the norm we are accustomed to, where video games are little more perhaps than a to-do list masked by slick presentation. Maybe this is a cynical view to take. Think on how often you have heard someone lazily criticizing the Ubisoft open world formula, a map littered with objectives to be completed, so many that it becomes meaningless drudgery, repetition. Think also on the grinding gameplay of turn-based RPGs, where the player has to churn through monotonous battles in order to improve their character to an arbitrary level. As Civilization 4's designer Soren Johnson has said, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. Understanding boredom as a process to be endured, suggesting some goal or a point in which the boredom ceases and the bored person has succeeded, there then emerge some situations in which boredom is seen as acceptable and valiant. Willfully, players will bore themselves if it enables them to accomplish a future goal. Think about searching for diamonds or wither skulls in Minecraft, or the early days of watering plants and cleaning your farm of debris in Stardew Valley, or watching ads in a mobile clicker game to give yourself a bonus. living in a buzzword-flooded post-internet neoliberal late capitalist society, we are all accustomed to the desire to monetize every facet of existence. The rise of the gig economy shames the individual for enabling any slice of downtime. Any time not spent optimizing, producing capital, or bettering the perception of our personal brands is seen as a failure. The boring term itself, the word a bore, to be a bore, originates globally and across language from sometime between 1760 and 1820, around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Before developments that brought upon the manufacturing line, it seems humanity felt no need to express this state with its own term, or perhaps even did not experience it in the same way. Perhaps this sudden acceleration of industry and culture uprooted some previously dormant sensation, or unsettled to the core what was once a satisfaction with living and slowness. Without such a focus on efficiency, downtime may not have been experienced as adverse, but perhaps as crucial or precious. In this view, boredom in the modern day becomes some form of protest, and not just in some sort of stoner burnout, early Green Day, brain stew, long view kind of aimless protest or rage against some general conformity, a tradition also reflected in the British punk scene of the 70s, but a deep and significant internal denial of neoliberalism's creeping hand. This idea was first outlined by Jean Baudrillard in The Consumer Society. I quote, "The go slow or slowdown of factory workers or the school child's boredom are all forms of passive resistance. They are ingrowing in the way one speaks of an ingrowing toenail, turning back in towards the flesh, towards the inside." In fact, for him, boredom becomes the only form of activity which can be set against the constraint of general passivity which applies in current social relations. Thinking on this framing of boredom as a passive sign of discontent towards a wider economic or social system, utilizing boredom within a video game could be a way of engaging the player unknowingly, always the best way with gamers, with political ideologies or themes. For example, Stephen Lovell's game Q makes the player wait in line for their appointment at the social welfare office. The only actions the player may take are taking a number and handing in your number in the queue. Text scrolls very slowly and the player is forced into an uncomfortable position of active waiting, making mechanical the anxiety the protagonist is feeling. In 1975, on his way home from the recording studio, at the time glam rock superstar Brian Eno was hit by a car. This story has since reached the plane of myth, so who can speak to its truth, but it has been reported that while recovering, Eno's girlfriend brought round an LP of harp music. He says, "After I had lain down, I realized that the amplifier was set at an extremely low level, and that one channel of the stereo had failed completely. Since I hadn't the energy to get up and improve matters, the record played on, almost inaudibly. This presented what was for me a new way of hearing music, as part of the ambience of the environment, just as the color of the light and sound of the rain were parts of the ambience." The music Eno went on to develop came to define the ambient genre. Mellow and spaced out lonely notes, little push or progression or momentum, music designed to melt into the ambient environment of the listener. Different, perhaps, from muzak, which was intended to provide a rhythmic flow to a space, to funnel people and keep them moving, or shopping, which is more psychologically focused and deliberate. The word ambient, originating from the Latin ambire, to go around, is now defined by Google as relating to the immediate surroundings of something, i.e. a room's ambient temperature, or, interestingly, relating to or denoting advertising that makes use of sites or objects other than the established media, e.g. by placing slogans on the back of bus tickets. Rather than thinking of ambient as a descriptor that implies quietness, then, we can more accurately think of it as describing work that relates in some way to the physical experience of interacting with it and with the world around you. Ambient music sinking into the background and becoming part of the listener's world's texture, or ambient literature as defined by Tom Aber, that makes specific reference to the mechanic or material of the book or screen you are reading. Ambient work becomes almost Brechtian, fourth wall breaking, bringing the viewer's attention to the mechanics that enable their art experience. But whereas this kind of thing is often done through metatextual eyebrow raising or postmodern winking, an ambient work is more likely concerned with the physical material of the medium, structural almost. Think about my breath occasionally popping the microphone, peaking the audio. Notice when I sluggishly take ugly inhales or smack my lips. And now let me reel this back in and talk about video games again. David O'Reilly's Mountain, I think, is a fine example of an ambient game. If played on PC, the game operates in a small window that the player may leave running in the background behind other applications. Interaction is kept to a minimum, and really the way to play is by not interacting, in the same way a reader would not read a work by Tan Lin. Over time, your mountain may have a thought it would like to tell you, notifying you with a little sound. The game becomes part of the texture of your computer experience, utilizing and maintaining your awareness of the desktop as a space, as material, as mechanism. In this way, Natalie Lawhead's games like Cyberpet Graveyards that utilize the desktop space may also be viewed as ambient, or a desktop love story that makes use of abstract systems like your computer's administrative properties and file hierarchies. And just spitballing here, but what else could be seen as ambient? Motion games like Johann Sebastian Joust or 1-2 Switch that play without a screen, perhaps. Regardless, thinking of ambience as some form of embodiment, some totality of surrounding and your place within it, or more accurately, perhaps an awareness of the player's body, and in turn the virtual body the player is inhabiting, we can see facets of this form appearing all over. In fact, it is my contention that the awkwardness of the virtual body is a primary focus of contemporary AAA game design. Death Stranding, a simple game about hiking, demonstrates an extraordinary focus in controlling the body of the virtual Sam. We can see this just from browsing the controls and contemplating how much real estate certain mechanics are given. R1 holds your breath, L2 and R2, notably analog, suggesting some degree of mastery or finesse, control how you shift your center of gravity. Press the central touchpad to call out in hope that someone may hear. Like Red Dead Redemption 2, Death Stranding goes to certain lengths to make some mechanics fiddly or unintuitive. Both these games ask players to slow down, struggle with awkwardness, and reflect on the way they embody virtual characters. Both I would think of as semi-ambient works. Both, I think, also have been described by many players as boring. Perhaps because these games are more demanding, perhaps because these games ask the player to be more active in their consumption. No autopilot is allowed when simple movement becomes a chore. Gamers are forced to engage in a different, more introspective, attentive, mindful way. So let us turn to slow cinema, a genre of film focused on contemplative pace, often a pointed absence of narrative or dialogue and an emphasis on minimalism and long unbroken takes. The languid rhythm of shots, slow individually and slowly cut together, becomes a psychedelic tapestry where melancholic realism is juxtaposed with dreamlike poetic imagery to create a feeling of reflection, of memory. To watch a slow film is to be forced into a position of active participation. Speaking of Andy Warhol's 5-hour, 20-minute film Sleep, that, as its name suggests, simply shows a shot of somebody sleeping, viewers remark how, although deadly boring, the way the film over time rearranged their expectations made small moments like the rustling of a sheet or the movement of a limb into profound moments of drama and excitement. It is almost as if boredom is grown by years of expectation. I think about films made for babies. I used to watch this VHS called Baby Einstein that was a compilation of shots of simple repeating actions like a marble rolling down a spiral track, food coloring dissolving in glasses of water, puppets or animals moving slowly, sometimes synced to a backing track of mellow Mozart music. Babies of a certain age do not get bored by what they see. They can watch the same video on loop indefinitely with the same continued attentiveness and interest. What happens with age that makes us so restless? What happened to our ability to exist in ecstatic aimlessness, and how can we reclaim such an intangible thing? In his unfinished novel, The Pale King, David Foster Wallace attempts to paint boredom as a redemptive experience, as one that can purify and make whole a broken person. To depict the endurance of mind-numbing boredom as heroic. Scenes show characters struggling to maintain their focus, visualizing pleasant beaches. One character focuses so intently he floats above his chair, evoking the image of a meditation guru. Where boredom in the workplace may send one of his characters into a self-destructive spiral of doubt, another may harness this experience and discover new superpowers. An extended section of the book shows a character's progression from a student wastoid to a by-the-books accountant, having discovered the pleasing dissociating qualities of boredom. Boredom indeed can be a way of distancing yourself from the rapid pace of the post-internet world. A time for reflection or meditation. Transcendental meditation, as promoted by the David Lynch Foundation, has mechanically a lot in common with boredom in that they both share a focus on the rejection of external stimuli and are both activated by repetition. If you were to practice transcendental meditation, you may visualize certain sounds on each in and out breath, focusing your mind on your bodily functions in such a way as to tap into a higher plane of consciousness. To transcend, like moving the feather up and down delicately in Celeste, or moving the legs of your runner in Quap. Perhaps in such a hellish world as ours, boredom is a crucial escape, a chance to not think, a moment of pause where we need not seek stimulation or validation. It sounds almost puritanical when put this way, but I genuinely feel slowness and fatigue may be a form of hope. So here we are surfacing now from this full body flow and reverie, and I'd like to connect all of this back to my own branch of practice. I thought a lot of the orange creeping stretches of sand in Desert Bus when designing the game Brownie Cove Cancelled, which Kotaku described as an oversaturated dreamscape, one that aptly simulates the languid, draining pace of airport life as travelers slowly cook under sickly fluorescent lights. In the opening moments, the player is told that their flight has been delayed by 6 hours. Waiting for this flight in real time is the only way to win the game. What does a video game require of you other than your time? An arbitrary amount determined by the developer required to be spent in order for completion. By surreal turn of fate and echoing the popularity and longevity of Desert Bus, players actually did this. There is at least one 6-hour stream of somebody completing Brownie Cove Cancelled, to be told, to the horror of their chat, that the flight had been cancelled and that we were thankful for their time. In our game definition of a guest, you play as 2 characters watching a film at a spontaneous drive-in screening. The film depicts a short loop of somebody moving about a hotel room. The player can choose how the characters react to the film, through boredom or introspection, and in turn the game encourages players to consider how they respond to unusual stimuli and reflect on the context in which they consume media. Our game on display in the Left Field collection, Kitchen for One, also engages with boredom in its own way. Through repetition, through frustrating and obscured gameplay systems, and through unexpected video clips that could last up to 5 minutes. And I'll leave you with this quote from Walter Benjamin's Arcades project. "Boredom is a warm grey fabric lined on the inside with the most lustrous and colourful of silks. In this fabric we wrap ourselves when we dream. We are at home then in the arabesques of its lining, but the sleeper looks bored and grey within their sheath, and when they later wake and want to tell of what they have dreamed, they communicate by and large only of this boredom. For who would be able at one stroke to turn the lining of time to the outside?" Thank you.